will continue to let people in. So let me start then with my screen share. And you can see now that we're going to be moving on to building the team dynamic. And this is very much a conversation that we've not yet been having, which is about the team as a team. And I'm very eager to explore this. Let's do our usual, though, reminder of where we've been and where we are heading. So first of all, we got your heading to the game through that case study. We thought about your role as a manager and competencies. We've got you thinking about managing upwards, managing downwards, more about understanding yourself and others, so what makes people tick. And then yesterday on working with people as individuals. So now we're beginning to think about the whole team as a team, and then we'll be looking at some of the challenges that you face before drawing it all together. Remember, yes, what are the specifics? So we're going to be 3 specific areas for today. We're going to be looking at life cycle of teams, and this again might be a theory, a model that you have met before. I'm going to be getting you to do some group work on that, so that you can consider any of the telltale signs for each of the stages, and therefore what you can do to nurture your teams. I'll be looking at a piece of work from an author called Patrick Lencioni, and he talks about there being 5 dysfunctions of a team, and also again what you as a manager leader can do to address those things, what to look for and how to address them. And I will also be sharing with you some 6 key headings which for me constitute the characteristics of an effective team. And it becomes almost a way in which a checklist so that you can assess the healthiness of your team at any moment. And then finally, we'll be coming to, again, that model of situational leadership, but you're going to be looking at that today in relation to 3 different case studies, and you're going to be working in 3 groups on one of those case studies, and then we will have a presentation back from each of the rooms. So that's our general direction of travel. You know all of this now, and I think it's been useful just to remind ourselves of it. So I know that we're managing neatly to start and end on time. People appear to be nice and present here with us in the room. Where you are able, you put cameras on, certainly for your presentations, and I hope that you are often able to do that, particularly when you're working in small groups. But I know it's about the stability of your broadband connections. I think you all have been super at updating your name tags. And again, please continue to engage with me through your additional comments and questions in the chat so that I can pick anything up, and I hope do a reasonable job at addressing your further questions as we work together. So that probably therefore gives us our direction of travel for today. I'm just moving my screen so I can see you all better. There we are, that's much better now. And I can now begin to address this notion of building the team dynamic. So let me just get those in a row. Okay. So today we're going to see how everything that we've been covering yesterday begins to apply to the team as a whole. After all, teams are nothing more, are they, than a group of individuals, right? Well, it turns out that when you put a group of people together, then it's different, really. Yes, you still have to continue to manage them as individuals, but you also need to think about them as a whole. It can often be the case that predictable and unpredictable dynamics start to happen. When it comes to some of the predictable dynamics, I want to share with you some of the thinking of Bruce Tuckman. And he, working in the mid-60s, published this in 1965, so it is already quite an old concept in many ways. But he actually felt that he observed groups go through different stages of development. So imagine for a minute that there are 20 of you seated in a room and that you have never met before, and wondering what the atmosphere would be within that. Of course, there are different personalities in the room. Some might feel able to engage with others and chat. But do you know what? I bet there's going to be a lot of silence. People are going to be doing a lot of looking at their mobile phones rather than necessarily engaging with others. So what he says happens in the first stage, and let me again get my spotlight on so that I can make it more visible for you. So here in the forming stage, here he says that groups come together and actually no one almost dares challenge anything because we don't know each other, therefore we don't know what we can say. We can't necessarily predict how other people will react. And indeed, there's very probably limited eye contact and interaction. Most people, as I said, are going to be looking down at their mobile devices. Once a group has begun to get to know each other, and you are instrumental in enabling that to happen. So think about when you have a new joiner to your team, how do you enable, and I'm not talking the functional induction into that person's role, but how do you induct them into the team as a whole so that the team gets to know them and they get to know the individual personalities in the team? You're instrumental, so start to think about that. Because when you're in your group work, this is what I'm going to get you working on. What then happens is the start of a new task, a group task or a challenge comes along, and now the group will tend to move into someone stepping forward, offering to take the lead, coming up with some ideas. But then what you get is that others start, so I'm not sure I agree with that. So there are some challenges around it. In fact, this might be quite a dangerous moment, because in that the group might not only storm as a whole group, but it might also fractionalize a breakdown into sub-teams. So you end up with these little sub-cliques and subgroups, and that is something to beware of. So think about that already. What are you going to do to manage that situation? You somehow navigate that, you pop out the other end, and the group then moves into what is called the norming phase. So it normalizes, and it probably then starts to set its own rules of engagement. It might even have a charter of how it wants to behave together as a team. When it then begins to be ready for any of the next challenges, the next tasks that come along. In that norming phase, things tend to be more calm, and that is in contrast, of course, to the storming phase. The next team challenge task comes along, and now, because the group knows each other as a group of individuals, because they have a better, clearer purpose, because they have some either verbalized rules of working together, or somehow it has established itself as rules without ever noting them. The group is now ready to perform and can step up to this task and achieve it. And actually, rather than describing that as a graph, I sometimes present that as a circle, a virtuous circle. Because once a group performs, it could well be that you get one or more people move on, leave the organization, leave the team. It may be that you get some new people join you, and guess what? You are thrown all the way back to the performing stage. Now, what I've just described, that notion of people leaving, Bruce Tuckman actually identified this latterly as a further stage. So let me go then. He called, so you can see here we've got forming, storming, norming, performing. but now we have a fifth one called adjourning, and that's his name for it. And in this slide that you're looking at, we've got a description here in the top third about the atmosphere in the room, in the group, what it looks like. We've got a description of potentially how the team members are feeling. And you've got a potential list here of the kinds of things that the team manager, team leader should consider. They're not an exhaustive list, but things that you should consider. Now, I want to, before I get you off into groups to do a first piece of work together today, I want to also share another potential stage with you that doesn't come from Bruce Tuckman at all. It doesn't come from me either. It comes from a very dear learning and development colleague who I have known for many years in 2 different humanitarian organizations. And he says that he often sees sliced in the middle between performing and adjourning another stage. So I'm going to leave my little sign sitting there if I can. There it is. And he calls this stage snoring. So it is as if everybody, having performed, they do this they kind of nod off and go to sleep and start to snore. And it's when the adrenaline has fallen from performing and kind of some lethargy, tiredness, some snoring, all of those words I think work perfectly well. And I think at that time, when you see that happen, I think he's so wise in having observed this. I would like you to start to think about, oh, does my team ever do that? And what do I do to re-energize them? So bear that in mind. So that's the first thing I wanted to add to what we have seen. Now, for many of you, I am sure that is a familiar model. But I want to give you an example of how I used it just a few years ago with an organisation in the UK, in England, and it was a museum. And it was a museum that was a not yet established museum. One of the local governments had identified a building that it no longer needed, that was redundant, and it was a former courthouse. And in the UK, we have different levels of courts. Some of you might have a degree of familiarity with different levels of courts in the UK, because, of course, whether we like it or not, much of the British judiciary was replicated around the world. And we have in that court a magistrates court and a high court and a civil court. And in this building, it was very dilapidated, old and run down. It was in disrepair. It was no longer needed. It was expensive, even just to keep. So Anne, I've just seen a message coming. Could I remind you what the 5 discussions are under forming? So you're not going to be having 5 discussions under forming. You will each be in a group. One group will be looking at forming, one will be looking at storming, one will be looking at norming, one performing, and one adjourning. So if I just give you this illustration, then I will clarify that for you all again. So the council decided to set the building up as a museum. It attracted a lot of funding from the lottery fund, and it was renovated back to its state in the 19th century. So it was turned into a beautiful venue. All of the staff were hired in readiness for the opening just after Easter, because then comes our summer in the UK, and this is a peak time for people actually visiting and visiting museums. And what I did in using Tuckman was that I realized I only had 2 weeks once these people had been hired to get them ready to be working with the public on their grand opening day. We hired round about 30 people. They didn't have job descriptions. We just hired them because we looked actually for talent in the performing arts, because they were going to act as court clerks. They were going to act as prisoners. They were going to act as all of the people who populated this building back in the 19th century. And on that first day, I had everybody sitting in a massive circle. And as I described forming earlier, there they were all looking down, looking at their mobile phones, people feeling very nervous, very anxious, no interaction. The first thing I did was to welcome them, and then I gave them a group activity. It was only possible to complete this group activity if everybody divided up the tasks. They learned to trust each other instantaneously. They were each working on different tasks simultaneously, and then they brought the whole thing back together. This activity takes about 90 minutes to do, and at the end of it, we debriefed what they had done. They now knew each other better. There was a buzz and an excitement about the place, and effectively I had pushed them through the forming stage, and I was consciously thinking of this. The next thing that I did was I then set them on day 2 a new challenge, and this time I actually certainly didn't appoint any leaders. I waited again to be successful, and this was now more about the museum. They actually had to start to claim areas and take responsibility. And then one person might claim an area and somebody else might be affronted because they wanted that area. I actually forced them to storm. It was difficult, it was awkward, it was unpleasant, but out of that came the decision on their part that if we are going to be ready in 2 weeks' time, we now need to know what our job roles are, and we need to know how we are going to work together. So they started to normalize and set the tasks and rules. I then, not that's in that next day, but in the second week of this whole induction, when we thought we were about ready, we then invited people from other buildings nearby to come to the museum as if it were the first day. So they were our first visitors. They didn't pay to come in. They were our guinea pigs. We were experimenting with them. And so this was the chance for them as a group to perform. Of course, we debriefed it. Of course, not everything worked perfectly, but it meant that come the opening day, we were ready. And indeed, this is a format that I've used, that this organisation continued to use, because of course, over time, there's a turnover of staff members, not everybody stayed, so there was an adjourning. New people were hired and variations of that same full activity took place. So I hope I've just given you a real illustration of how I have pushed people through Tuckman's life cycle. Now, people often ask, how long does it take to get from one stage to another? And the honest answer is, well, it depends. And there I increased the speed, the rate at which we went through it. It also looks as though it's linear. You go from forming to storming to norming to performing. What can happen is a group goes from forming, it looks as though it's about to storm. People don't want to do that, so they jump straight to norming. I will pretty much guarantee they will backtrack and they will definitely need to storm. Now, I've probably given you enough stories and illustrations for you to begin to think about this group work. So let me stop sharing that, and I'm not ignoring that conversation in the chat. I'm going to come back and check it, but I just want to share another screen with you right now. It's this one. It's this one, slideshow. I'm not sure it's going to let me go to slideshow. It may have done. Are you seeing breakout activity life cycle of teams? So in your group, you are only going to be given one of those areas. You will be given either forming or norming or storming or norming or performing or adjourning. Okay. And in your group, you're going to be asked to think, what are the telltale signs? What does that phase feel like to you? What's the climate like? How do you think members feel? How should you, the manager, be responding to this in very practical ways? So if you would all like to take a screenshot of that, a screen grab, or get your mobiles out and just take a quick photograph so that you've got that with you when you are in your groups, I'll just let that happen. Meanwhile, I'm coming back to the chat. Oh, lovely. Right. So certain things are happening here. So let me have a look and make sure I've helped Anne and Camilla. I can see you came in, I think, very helpfully as well. So thank you for your interpretation. What Anne asks, I think, is in the team leader actions under the forming column, Andrea. Oh, thank you very much, Camilla, for that clarification with and on behalf of Anne. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to stop sharing that one right now. I'm going to come back and share the first of these, if I can now find it. Here we go. I'm going to come back a screen. Oh, no, I need to go back. Oh, hang on, what's going on here? I'm going the wrong way and I don't know why. Oh, that's very odd. My screen's doing something very odd. I need to stop sharing, everybody. I need to go back to my PowerPoint and see what is actually happening here. Oh, I don't know is the answer. I think it did something very strange. So let me try and recover it. Oh, yes. Okay. I think I've recovered it, although it is still showing something very odd. Okay. Right. Let me come back and share this screen now. There we are. Okay. So hopefully you're now seeing it. So, right, okay, so Anne, Camilla, thank you for the clarification. So everything here in the bottom portion under each of the headings is what the team leader or team manager should do in order to help the group manage itself during the forming stage. So the suggestion for forming is that it should promote, the manager should promote optimism. It should say what our aims and purpose are as an organisation and as a team. It should give, he or she should give clear roles and directions. Do the 5 discussions, right? Gotcha. The 5, beg your pardon, thank you so much for the clarification. 5 discussions are the who, what, why, where, when. Okay, ask those questions, and also because we will have looked at the why in terms of that, so that you'll have looked at why by giving a direction and clear roles, and then the what we're doing, why we're doing it, where we're doing it, when we're doing it, how we're doing it. My apologies, Anne. Thank you very much for all of that. Get some kind of collaboration agreement and actually share with the group the stages so that people understand what might be happening around them. Have I gone some way to help that as well? So the collaborative agreement, that might be where the group begins to talk about what do we think our ways of working should look like. So it might take the form of a team charter, a charter of expectations of each other. Okay, so I'm going to think now I've probably given you enough ideas to get you going on that. I'm now going to stop my screen sharing. I'm going to hand over to Joyce. She's already put in there, group 1 is forming, group 2 is storming, etc. Please, when you come back, would one person from each group be prepared to write their answers to the questions in the chat box, and I will review them. Thank you very much. Fantastic. So if you would, where you had a if you would like now to put your responses into the chat box, so and actually put if you were forming or storming or norming, etc., that would be really helpful. And I will just do a very brief review of your thinking there. I'm just giving you a chance to take a look at that. I'm watching my chat box to see if I've got some information coming in. Lovely, perfect. Things starting to come in now. That's great. So forming. So golden for the people who are in the forming group. Talk about employee personality, culture of the organisation. Listen more, give up excitement. Yeah, lovely. Stimulate some confusion and curiosity. In fact, now that you use that word, that's very much what I did with that particular group. Be welcoming, be supportive, and people are going to be nervous. They're going to be excited. Make sure you have frequent meetings. Yes, absolutely, perfect stuff. Very good on the forming side. Perfect. Let's see if other examples come in from storming, norming, performing, adjourning. So I get a sense of your understanding that has developed through this process. Adjourning, yeah, regarding the performed and asking to join a new project. Yes. So I would say celebrate the achievements of the group when there is a breaking up of the group or somebody moves away. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Rewarding. Yeah, lovely. So you reward them for achievements. And what I would also beware is when you are then pushed back to forming because one or more team members has left, whilst everybody else will naturally be mourning and missing those people who have gone, watch the language where people might say, oh, it's not the same now that so-and-so isn't here, because that's not terribly welcoming to other people. So you need to kind of change that language into, we achieved such a lot when so-and-so was here. We can achieve even more now that you have also joined the team, so that it kind of builds on that. So storming, you get miscommunication, jealousy, misunderstanding, defensiveness, emotional outbursts. Yes, you do. That's where you're most likely to get some of those tensions and arguments. So actually you may need to sit down and broker that, actually talk about different perspectives on things. It may well not be that there is a right or a wrong way to do something, but there is a difference of view as to how things might be done. And I'm taking a look to see if any of the others come in as well. So I'm not seeing any more at the moment. I am time conscious and I am going to move us on, if I may, by coming back and, oh, I am sharing on in the life cycle. So let me take us on to the next part. So we've done the group work, right. I fully acknowledge that you might still be putting things in chat, and that's absolutely fine, but I want to take you through a few more slides before there is another major piece of group work today. In the chat box right now, I would like you, if you will, to be putting in there what you consider to be the characteristics of effective teams. So again, it's almost a bit of a competition. I'm going to go for volume, single words, just keep typing. What are the characteristics of effective teams? Let's see what you come up with. And I can also see other things still going in about it. About being collaborative, says yes. Yeah, an effective team is clarity. Communication, communicative, performing, efficient, harmonized action, trust. Wonderful. All of these things are absolutely right. Leveraging on one another, respecting each other. Yeah, absolutely. Empathy, cooperative, Yeah, you've got the idea. If we stayed until 1/2 the next hour and did nothing more than add things to this list, you would all be right. But we would end up with a list that is so large, it would be difficult to do anything with it. Therefore, I'm now going to share with you some characteristics of effective teams. And my invite to you is to take away these 6 headings. That the characteristics of effective teams are a team that has clear objectives. So whose job is it to make sure those objectives are clear and well communicated to the team? It's yours as the manager. That there are good decision-making processes. People know and understand their level of authority and responsibility, and they know when they need to bring something back to you for an opinion, a decision. So you've got general good decision-making processes. C is you need trust, cooperation, support, and constructive conflict. Because actually you don't want a team of all yes people who only ever agree with each other and with you. You actually want a difference of view and opinion, because that brings shades of view. It's very good for problem solving, in fact, if there are different views, different ways of tackling something. D, we need clear roles, responsibilities, and leadership. So you need to make sure that each person has a good, clear job description, that they understand it, that you sit down with them and go through it with them, that they are clear on their responsibilities. Think back to the Jane case study. She certainly didn't seem to have a good understanding of her job role and what she needed to do less of and more of. Now, those first 4 tend to be inward looking, but now this 5th one, E, is about sound relationships with other groups. So think of other groups as other stakeholders who may be internal to the organisation or external partners with whom you work, and indeed beneficiaries. A strong team needs to have sound relationships with other groups, and therefore it's more outward looking from the team itself. And then F is analysis. So on a regular basis, not necessarily overly frequent, there's a subtle difference between those 2 words, is there not? So on a regular basis, maybe every 4 to 6 months, you lead your team through a review of how it is performing as a team. Now, what you could do is to share these 6 items with your team, and this would build very nicely on what we've just done around Tuckman and the characteristic and the life cycle of a team, and share these 6 items with them, and get your staff members to rate from their own perspective how well you as a team are doing against each of these. And you might ask them to score each of these out of 10, where 1 is poorly and 10 is brilliantly. And you could then collate that information, collate that set of scores and data, because that would then give you a picture as to which of these the team thinks, and you fill this in as well, which you think the team is doing well at and which less so. And where there is or are 1 or more of these that score less well, then those might be the area where you as a manager need to work. And then at the next review that you do as a team in, say, 4 to 6 months' time, you run that same mini questionnaire again, and you see how people are feeling now. This could be a really, really useful way that builds on Tuckman, and actually in itself is a way of analysing the process of the team's performance. Has that given you some ideas around that? A good way to use it? I'm just checking back in the chat box as well. Right, so let me come back. So there was also a question around Tuckman. So I just need to interpret it. So just bear with me while my head catches up. Is this cycle to be seen as a project or a team cycle? Oh, very, very good question. Brilliant question. Bruce Tuckman, when he first thought about it, was very much seeing it as a team, so a discrete functional team. However, I actually think that's a really astute question, Camillo, and where you are pulling together people from across different departments to work on a project, I think that you should share this as a model with them. Again, many of them may well be familiar with the model, but that might help push them through it. If you think about that example I shared with you about the museum, yes, those people were the employees of the museum ultimately, and they then each, in the end, had their own jobs and functions to perform. But I actually was treating that almost as a project to get them in 2 weeks flat from not being a team to being a team that could work for the opening week where they were open to the public. So I think that's a really strong way that you could use this in a project. Because in a project, let me contrast two things here. In your own team, you do have managerial authority. Do you remember the megaphone from earlier, the megaphone and the gramophone? You do have authority. Now, I am not advocating that an authoritarian dictatorial way of managing is good. At all. And actually, when you are running a project, you often don't have that degree of authority. You're responsible for the project, but everybody else has got their day job to do as well. Therefore, using a conversation around life cycle of teams and the characteristics of effective teams may help you when you are managing a project with people from different parts of the organization. Super question there. Thank you very much indeed. So I'm going to bounce forward now because I need to watch time. And I'm going to share with you this work from Patrick Lencioni, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Great book to read. And he says that where a team is dysfunctional, there's an absence of trust. And look at how much time we spent, was it yesterday, thinking about trust. And therefore, the consequence is that people think that they are invulnerable, they're defensive. There's a fear of conflict. And so actually what happens is superficial, artificial harmony. That's an echo of what we've just been talking about. There's a lack of commitment. I didn't understand what you said. It doesn't matter really. So the consequences, there's ambiguity and none of the team targets are really hit. There's an avoidance of accountability. People pass the buck. They don't take responsibility. And so actually what happens there is standards in the team fall. And there's an inattention to results. And as a result of that, people just go, people pretend that they are invincible, that their status, their ego, everything is in their job title rather than the results. And that's not the case at all, of course. So I'm doing this in a very quick format, so I do encourage you to get a copy of Patrick Lencioni's book. So what does he say successful teams look like? And therefore hints and tips for you as a manager. You need to create trust. We've been talking here about how you do that. You need to value conflict and difference of opinion because it can help with thinking of options when problem solving. You need to encourage commitment by giving objectives and holding people to account. So you promote that accountability. You need then also to celebrate the results of individuals and the team as a whole. Lastly, therefore, with our Patrick Lencioni, what's your role? Your role is where people are nervous and anxious, go first, show that you are willing to give things a go, even if something is new to you. Show them that it is also okay to not get things perfect first time round. You also want to mine for conflict. So you're actually, if you see something brewing, some tension, in one-to-ones with people, ask them, how are you getting on with? I feel that I noticed there was some tension between you and X. Is that the case? Am I understanding that correctly? What's the issue? How can I help? Okay, mind for conflict. Where there is lack of commitment, forced clarity and closure, so that's back to hold people account for their objectives, deadlines, and so on. So you need also to tell them the consequences of any of that not being achieved. Rhoda, I think you're in the room with us today. Yes, you are. If my memory serves me right, are you in HR? And therefore, I hope that the language I'm using there in terms of holding people to account, using the objectives, because should you need to take action on those consequences, that will support you. Would you agree with me on that, Rhoda?
Yes, yes, definitely. I would agree on that.
Yeah. Fantastic, thank you. Yeah. Do be prepared to confront those difficult issues. So you may well have had that one-to-one with people to kind of understand where the tensions are. You might now need to have a three-way meeting to really try to get to the bottom of it, to confront it and to put it to bed, to sort it. And then lastly, if I can get my mouse to behave, focus on collective outcomes and celebrate those results. And I'm going to tell you a story before I'm then going to get you off into some group work. And it's a story of when I was last in a large team, and we were all a team of learning and development people, and therefore we were out delivering programs with our clients out in the field. And my manager would get us together roughly once every 4 months in an evening, because that was the only time we had to see each other. But he would always engage a catering company to come and bring us a lovely hot meal. And he would use this opportunity to celebrate results, for us to acknowledge each other's skills and talents. And sometimes he would present a bottle of champagne to the individual who had done something really well. And then we talk about it. How did you do that? So it really got us energized and curious about the way somebody had tackled something. And of course, that person would share the champagne with all of us. Now, I fully understand alcohol may not be appropriate in many settings. It was in that setting culturally. So that was why he used that with us. On one occasion, we saw the bottle of champagne in the corner of the room. So we were nudging each other and saying, I wonder who's going to get the bottle of champagne today. Right towards the end of our evening together, he presented the champagne to the whole team, but instead of this being about a celebration of success, he said, I want to talk to you about Project X. It was a piece of work that we had all been working on, and it had not gone very well, and the client had not been very happy. We had all been very embarrassed and felt very awkward about it, but nobody had been talking about it or our lessons learned. This was a really clever tactic from my beloved boss, Peter, because he said, this is not about blame. Let's just talk about it. So, and drink the champagne at the same time. So he actually turned it into celebrate failure, so that we could relax about, oh, and I did that, and it was awful, and I shouldn't have done that, or I missed that deadline, and it was critical. And it meant that it opened up our discussion enormously. Now, I share that story because I think it fits well with Bruce Tuckman, and I think it fits well with the dysfunctions of a team. So I'm now going to take us forward again, but I do recommend that book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Patrick Lencioni. We're going here now to Hersey and Blanchard again. I want you to have that picture in your head at the very least, because you're going to do some group work. You're going to be working in 3 groups. I'm going to stop sharing that screen. I'm going to share with you, if I can, here we are. This is what I want. Okay, in your workbook, you should be seeing the workbook now. And indeed, Is that right? Are you seeing the workbook? I'm hoping you are. And in the workbook, there are 3 case studies. They are on pages. They're on pages 33, 34, and 35. One group is going to be asked to look at this one called the budget shortfall in a voluntary organisation. It's only quite short, and you will also there have some 4 questions to discuss that case study through. And I will ask you when you come back for there to be a spokesperson from each group to share your answers to those questions with regard to your case study. The questions are the same every time. What style or approach has the manager adopted? So think Hersey and Blanchard. If you were one of the team members, how would you react? What are the pros and cons of the approach? And how else might the manager have approached the problem? Another group is going to be asked to look at the local needs survey for a National Health Service Trust. The questions are the same. And the third group is going to be looking at the forthcoming conference for a membership organisation, and the questions are the same. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that screen. I'm going to share, I hope, where is it? This one. Okay, share this one. Let me move this back over. So what you should be seeing now is my summary of what you are being asked to do there, which is visit the case study in the workbook. You're only going to be looking at one. I'm sure Joyce is putting into the chat box right now the number or name of your group and the task you have. You're going to look at the questions in the workbook, and you have a maximum of 20 minutes. And I want one spokesperson to perhaps post their thoughts into the chat box and be ready to speak briefly about their conversation. I'm just coming back to chat right now. Right, great. I can see that Joyce has put all of that in the chat box for you. Right, super. I'm going to stop sharing. Away to your groups. Thank you very much. One person had sent a message to say that they had to go. They are on an interview panel, so we have had some changes in attendance during the course of today. So if you are able to put any comments in chat box, that would be wonderful. But I am now going to briefly go around each of the groups. So in fact, let me share a particular screen. It's going to be that one, and I'm going to put it on current slide and slideshow. There we are. So group one, you have the budget shortfall. So where's my spokesperson for that briefly to comment? Where am I looking?
Yeah, I'll be
Thank
gladly.
you. Thank you.
So we understand that the style, the manager approach is directive. So he gives directions to his staff members what to do directly without asking their opinions, ideas, anything else. How would you react on this as a team member? I will accept the task because this is the way the manager, I guess, used to give tasks to his team members. But maybe I will try and ask to provide more information on the problem and try to check if there is a room for other opinions, you know, maybe to find another way. Yeah, but I would do it politely, you say, pulping the problem. What are the pros and cons of this approach? Plus is that I see from this description that a manager gives clear task and try to share tasks among staff members according to their best skills and knowledge. He says, you know, you are an expert in this and this, so could you please do the following task? There's a minus. Ideally, when you describe the problem and then the solving of it, each team member know his or her. So when you have a problem in the project, actually your team members should know their job descriptions, and it should come genuinely from the problem you describe. But if they are not aware of the job description, or you have equal roles in the team, so you might want to have a discussion of how to best redistribute the roles inside the team, so that each team member feel no concerns or doubts about his or her role in the team. And the last, actually, how else might the manager have approached the problem? Actually, that should be the first step. And first, explain the problem again, and propose the discussion on finding the solution for the problem, to hear each and every team member using and find and try to elaborate the best option, best solution, using the professional skills of the team members, their all their skills, different personality qualities, all they have inside to find the best decision. And when all the team is working on the problem, then everybody feels their involvement and should feel the responsibility for the result. But when you decide your own what to do, then you take all the responsibility on yourself, and it's not a team building.
Super feedback. Thank you so much, Ilya. That's brilliant. Good feedback. Thank you very much. So which group looked at the local needs survey? Group 2. Do I have a spokesperson for group 2, please? Camillo, yes, thank you.
Hi, yeah, I took the notes. So, well, this is yeah. Should I quickly describe the case? Is or not? Not really. Everyone is supposed to know.
I'm going to say no, because I did hope that people, aside from reading their own, they might also have a quick look at the other two, and you can all go back to it. So if you will just go for the feedback. Thank you.
Okay. So we found that the style of the manager was very inclusive and stimulating of participation. Yeah. However, we also see that the decision making remains with the manager, so he's not really involving people in the decision. And there also seems to be some lack of a structure in the way the problem is approached. So for instance, he's not giving any context about, you know, what the survey is about, like when, how, the purpose, or anything. Yeah. So people, although from on one hand can feel appreciated because the opinions are taken into account and maybe feeling part of the team and engaged, they can also feel confused if there is no clarity about the subject, and also not inspired because of the same, because it is not clear how they can contribute. Yeah. So in the pros and cons, we think yeah, the positive is there is lots of ideas, there is lots of inclusion. It could be that there is more backing up of the decision compared to just not asking anything. On the cons, maybe that is this inclusive approach is always time consuming. You need to harmonize and get agreement about different ideas. And also could be a decision is really not with the team, so you get a lot of inputs and then he decides by himself, her or herself. And then different ways of approaching the problem. Well, there are yeah, different alternatives that are not really defined, let's say, but okay, maybe another idea could be having like kind of brainstorm with the most the core part of the team, like just to have an initial, you know, something to start with, and then involve the rest of the team. Or another alternative is how to involve the team in the decision-making process as well. or how in stages. So one stage that you have the brainstorming, and then you have like more wrapping up and deciding with the team. But important in general is providing more information and guidance on the subject, and how is expected that there is involvement from the team members. So setting a little bit the expectations and context. So yeah, that's our discussion.
Super, Camilla, excellent feedback, excellent consideration of this situation. So let me turn now to the third group. You looked at the forthcoming conference. So where's the spokesperson for this, please? I'm aware it's now already past, so let me see where my spokesperson is. I'm looking around the room.
In our group, someone was taking notes. If you can read the notes, I think.
Well done, Rhoda.
Yeah. That was our group, but there was someone, I forgot her name, was taking the notes, and I would like her to read it because we were saying it randomly. Ideas. Thank you.
So Boniface, was Boniface taking the notes?
No, I was in the second group.
No, Anne and Hasbullah. Could you please remind me who was taking notes in our group? I forgot her name.
No.
Sorry, I don't have also remember.
Okay.
I don't remember. Maybe
Yeah.
those who were noting can just respond, or she must
Yeah,
be
Prof.
left already.
Yeah, Prof. I think you can just respond because you remembered the answers.
No.
Okay. Everyone,
Okay.
Everyone, I'm conscious of time, and I promised a non-start time, start and finish, and I think there is some confusion. I'm just wondering if it might have been Charity who's had to leave the room right now. May I try to be helpful by just reading some summary points from the case study to see if this reflects something of what you've discussed. So let me go with it. The manager has made a decision on how this project will be managed based on their experience and the previous year and the consultation with the team at the time. But here the team manager is now trying to be creative, dynamic and motivating by getting the team members to rise to the challenge. And indeed, the manager has identified a new project leader for the next year round, but they need to be careful that in so doing, they don't exclude other members not directly involved. The advantages of this, it can develop the skills base of the team and extend experience. And of course, this is also a good example of appropriate delegation to other team members, and that's good for time management of the manager. But the manager also needs to be aware the team seeing this as the manager abdicating their responsibility for the project. So they need to keep an open door policy with the new leader of this project now. Managers must remember that they delegate the authority to act and the responsibility, but they remain ultimately accountable for the project. And the manager might have made themselves project leader. That is another option. They could have run it again. However, that would have meant that they would have missed out on the development opportunities this project presents through delegating it to others. So Rhoda and your colleagues, Hasbullah, I think, who were in that team, have I gone some way to summarising some of your discussion and thinking there?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't took a note. Yeah, thank you for that summarize. And yeah, it is about that.
Yeah, don't worry, that's absolutely fine. It's not a problem at all. I, of course, have notes ready. So just for any kind of situation like this that comes along. So I'm now just going to quickly stop sharing that screen because I'm aware I am over time. I am going to go back to, oh, I think I've lost it. I may well have lost my screen now. Oh, no, here we go. It's this one. Okay, here we go. Okay, and I'm going to go to this one. From current slide, so reflection. So into the chat box, would any of you like to put any one-word takeaways from today's session? Put your one-word takeaways from today's session. I'll just watch that as it might come in as I wrap up, with a huge thank you for your time today, your participation as we've been looking at managing the team as a team. We've been looking at the life cycle of a team. We've been looking at the dysfunctions of a team and the characteristics of a team. I hope I've given you some ideas on what to do in order to take a team through to maturity. And you've taken another visit again to Hersey and Blanchard, thinking about those 3 case studies. Do go back to those case studies and have another look at them, if you will, in the light of not only your group's discussions, but the other 2 case studies that you might not have had a time to look at in the same way. I can see some very positive things coming into the chat box. I'll say a huge thank you to you for your time today, and I will see you again tomorrow for the 7th session, when our subject matter is going to be embracing the challenges. See you all, have a good day, take care, bye now.